People are coming in. Welcome to our webinar for today. Getting started teaching AP CSA. Always fun. Lots of people coming in. Hello, hello. All right. So while people are coming in, I will just pop the link in for the slides. I'll put it in a few times as more and more people begin to enter. Again, this is Getting Started Teaching AP CSA. I see some new names. Very cool. Welcome. And I see some names I've seen before, my regulars. How are you? Okay, I did put the link in for the slides. You do not have to open up the slides and follow along. You can just watch the screen if you would like. But if you would like to have access to the slides, I'll pop it in the chat for you one more time. Maybe you want to look at them later. All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. We've got a packed session for you today, getting started teaching AP CSA. And this goes from 11:30 to 1 o'clock Central Time. And then Brandy, if you could go to the next slide. Awesome. So in the chat, if you would, let us know a little bit about you. So where are you coming from? What state are you in? Have you taught APCSA? What are you looking to get out of this webinar? Maybe you're an expert and you're just looking for some tips. And then also what courses you teach. So anything you would like to share with us as we begin. California. Oh, first year teaching. Very nice. I did like teaching CSA. It's a challenging course, but it's so much fun. Woo! Switzerland, Wisconsin, very cool. Florida. So we were just talking about the heat before we opened up the room. Temperature-wise, it's not so bad, but this humidity is really making it a scorcher. Cheesehead State. Nice. Well, I will introduce myself. My name is Robin Leslie. I'm a PD specialist here at CodeHS. I'm coming to you from Northwest Indiana. So I am about 30 miles outside of Chicago. I did use CodeHS to not only teach myself computer programming, but also as the curriculum for my courses. Awesome. If you could go to the next slide, Randy. All right, so this is us. Your presenter for today is one of our amazing teacher trainers, Brandy Johnson, and I will let her tell you a little bit about herself, and then we'll just do a couple more slides on intros, and then we'll get into the content.
Hey everyone, my name is Brandy Johnson. I've been a teacher now for 16 years, originally in Northern California, but now I teach in rural Northeastern Nevada. This is going into my 7th year teaching computer science. I'm actually a ELA social studies teacher originally, but now I teach mostly computer science at my rural school, but still teach ELA and social studies too. So super excited to get to talk with you guys today and give you some tips and tricks for getting started with APCSA.
Awesome. If you could move to the next one. So here is our agenda. I just put the link to the slides in again so you can see. We're going to go, we'll have an overview of the course, a little bit about the exam, breaking down a unit or module in CSA, look at some of the resources, and then of course, answer any questions that you may have because we want to make sure that we answer all of your questions before we leave today. And then if you could go to the next slide. So a couple different ways for you to communicate with us today. At the bottom of your screen, there is the chat, and the chat is available. Many of you are using it. When you do chat, though, you'll want to make sure there is an option to chat with just the hosts and panelists, and there is one to send your message to everyone. So that is up to you. The other thing that we have is the Q&A. So if you have a question about CodeHS, a question for Brandy, and you don't want it to get lost in that chat area, you can go ahead and send those questions in the Q&A, which is also down at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to use the chat area to chat amongst yourselves, ask and answer questions, provide resources, anything you would like to do. We want to make sure you guys are engaged today, but if you want to make sure your question is seen by us, you might want to pop that one into the Q&A area so we make sure to answer that question. And if you could go to the next slide. If you don't already have a CodeHS account, CodeHS accounts are free, so I am going to drop that into the chat for you. There you go. That's how you can sign up for your free account. We do have to verify that you're a teacher, though, before we give you all of those answers. So that might take just a short bit, but you can definitely sign up and get in there. Oh, and I think there is an I attached to the end of that link. Let me pop this in here again. Not sure how that got there. Ah, there we go. So much better. All right. If you could go to the next slide. All right. So this is the certificate of completion link. So I'm going to pop that in. And if you click on this, this will give you a pop-up that says, "Thank you for attending." This is your ticket that says that you have attended this event. And I'll go ahead and I'll put that in again towards the end of the session so that if anybody missed it, you can click it then as well. In order for that certificate of completion link to work, though, you want to make sure that you are logged into your CodeHS account. Otherwise, it won't work. So log into your account first, and then you can click on that link. Awesome. All right, next slide. Those are the slides again. If you can't open up the slides, you're not on a computer, you want to scan it with your phone, you can also do that as well. And then you can go to the next slide. And then this is, I'm going to pop a link into the chat. And this link, there you go, we'll get you into the section that we made today. So we made a little section today that we're going to be using to show you some things. Again, if you're kind of mobile right now and you're not able to get into the section, that is okay. You can just follow along with Brandy as she goes. And then next slide. All right, Brandy's going to take it away. Again, if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Robin. So we're going to go ahead and get started today. So CodeHS is a really great comprehensive platform to get any kind of computer science curriculum pretty much that you could want or need in your classroom. Today, we're going to be focusing on CSA, but you can also share CodeHS with elementary teachers, middle school teachers, other high school teachers. They really have pretty much anything you could possibly want when it comes to computer science curriculum. And so they provide K-12 web-based computer science curriculum. It can be used on pretty much any device your students could be using. They also offer online and offline professional development. So like webinars, like what we're doing today, or you can also watch some of their pre-recorded videos if you miss a webinar, as well as lots of teacher tools and resources, some of which I'm going to go over with you today to help you get started with AP CSA. I know some teachers are already getting ready to go back to school. Some of us have a little longer, but hopefully at the end of this webinar, you feel like you can tackle AP CSA with more confidence than when you began. All right, So some of the things I love about CodeHS is the fact that it provides instant feedback for your students when it comes to their coding. So it'll like give them hints about where they may have went wrong, why their code isn't working. And so that to me is really helpful because as a teacher, as much as we would love to be everywhere at once, we just can't, unless one of you know how to clone somebody and then, email me. I'm really curious. Otherwise, CodeHS allows you to provide feedback for your students without actually having to be with everyone at the same time. It also has really extensive grading and tracking tools so you can see exactly where your students are at, help grade really quickly because most of it is like auto graded, which is amazing. It saves you so much time and energy without having to go through and grade every student one by one. Also, the fact that it's a web-based platform, they don't have any downloads or plugins. So if you're like me and your students are using Chromebooks, you don't have to worry about like having them download anything because Lord knows on a Chromebook you can't. So it's really great. All right, so we're going to go over real quick the course overview and how it's broken down. So you have AP CSA, which one of the options is a nitro course. This is, of course, a high school level class. It does require 130 contact hours, and it is a year-long course. Here's the link to the course overview. So you can see exactly what you're looking for in the class. And then it also has the course syllabus. You can share this with your administrators, of course, give it to your students and your parents. That way, everybody knows exactly what's going to be covered. So in this particular course, the units are broken down. You have primitive types, which are main methods, producing output, built-in data types, and how to create and interact with variables. Then you have using objects, which is how to create and use classes and objects with your students. From there, students get to go on to Booleans and if statements. So these are things like syntax and use of conditionals, Boolean variables, expressions, and then as well as relational and logical operators. Then they go on to iteration, which is for reusability and speed of programs, which are really heavy in the AP exam. And then they move on to writing classes. And then from there on to arrays and then array lists, which of course, then they get to move on to 2D arrays, which are a little bit more complicated. So scaffolded, nice, easy for you. You don't even have to worry about it. And then from there, you get to go on to inheritance and recursion. So what I do in my classes is I always figure out when is the AP test going to be, and then I backwards plan from there, because the last thing you want to do is just be like, okay, we're going to go, at this pace. And then all of a sudden, you're getting to the end of April and you're like, oh my God, I have 2 more units to cover before the test. So make sure you're kind of doing that backwards planning with the AP test in mind. That way you don't run out of things for your students to do, or heaven forbid, you have too much to cover and not enough time to cover it in. One of the things I also love too about CodeHS is that obviously they know your kids are going to be taking that AP test in May. And so they do have labs that are aligned with what the kids are going to do as part of their AP test. And they're all scaffolded very nicely. So they all start with baby steps, but then by the end of it, the students have done everything that College Board is going to ask them to do during that test in May. And so I would never, ever skip them. At least not all of them. Like if you're crunched for time and stuff, obviously, you feel like you can't cover all of the labs, at least have your students do a few, especially towards the end. That way they feel better prepared on what College Board's going to ask them to do when it comes time for the AP test. And so for this, for the labs, it does require about 20 hours in the class. And it does have them do lots of problem solving, working with classes, using inheritance and the OOP concepts. And so if your students do Mocha or Nitro, either one of the 2 AP CSA programs provided by CodeHS, they're going to have those lab hours in there as well. And so they're going to feel really prepared for the exam. My students last year were like, oh my God, like this was on the exam and this was on the exam and this is when we covered it. And I was like, phew, okay, felt so much better about that towards the end. Because of course, you can't ask them about it too early. So some of the examples of labs they have are the Celebrity Lab, which is one of my students' favorites. They have Consumer Review, Steganography. They have a Picture Lab, which is really fun. Mad Libs, which I always have to explain to my kids what those even are, which is super fun and really dates me. Then they have Magpie 11s. They have a really fun battleship one. There's a Pokemon simulation, which my kids completely geeked out on, and they just loved it. And then the Grid World Lab. So all of these help get your students prepared for those AP questions and the written response that they have to do as part of the AP exam in May, which is always such a stressful time. Now, MOCA is another option for your AP CSA. It was created before the 2019 curriculum update, and it also includes things like abstract classes and interfaces. They have 9 additional lessons that have been added in the past year. You can totally skip the main method or scanner classes. Those aren't covered anymore. The order is different from what the College Board has, and it is not an endorsed course for College Board. So if you're not teaching CSA at an AP level, this might be a good option for you. Not everybody wants to teach it at the AP level, but it's still a really great curriculum. All right, so let's go over a little bit into pacing. So this is based on a 5-day-a-week class and stuff, around 45 to 50-minute classes. So if you're doing block, of course, you'll have to make adjustments. I'm on a 4-day work schedule at our school, so I do have to adjust this a little bit, but it's really easy to make those adjustments when you look at how the course is broken down in the lessons and things like that, and I'll show you that in a minute. So it's broken down into primitive types, takes about 2 weeks, using objects 3, Boolean is another 3 weeks, and then so on down there. And then definitely notice at the bottom, you have that AP test practice for about 3 weeks. So as you're doing that backwards planning, make sure you build in time for that AP test practice. CodeHS does a really great job with their end of unit exams are very similar to how the questions are worded on the AP test. But you definitely want to give your students as much practice as humanly possible on the free response and just the test question practice and review. That way your students feel comfortable going in. They're not going to feel blindsided. Also giving them like timed practice tests, I found really helps my students with the pacing of how they need to go through the test to make sure that they're not running out of time or, heaven forbid, ending with too much time to spare, because that makes me nervous as well. All right, so the syllabus. The syllabus is really very user-friendly. I don't print this for my students because I don't like printing a whole lot in my classroom. We are kind of on a paper ration, so that's not allowed. So on the syllabus, I just post this usually in my Google Classroom for the students and the parents to review. And then I just have like a little contract and signature page that I have my parents sign, just letting them know what they're getting into with an AP class. And then what are some of the requirements as well, especially because depending on how your school handles the cost coverage of the AP test. I do fundraising throughout the year and I pay for my kids' test. So I have them sign a contract that says that they're going to meet certain requirements. Otherwise, they owe me the exam feedback. And so this just lets your students know exactly what's going to be covered with the classes. Everything that they're going to be expected to do, about how long everything is going to take. I also share this with my administrators so they know what it is I'm going to be covering. So depending on how your administrators feel about wanting to see your pacing guides or even more detailed lesson plans than this, you can give them this document so they know exactly what you're going to be covering. Now, another thing that College Board makes you do is you have to submit the course audit. So your course has to be authorized by College Board in order to gain access or to keep access to things like AP Classroom and the practice tests. And the only way you can do that is by submitting a course audit. Because CodeHS is already a licensed provider for College Board, they're already approved. You don't have to worry about, any of like, is it going to get bounced back? Do I have to submit my own stuff? Nope. You can just download the syllabus and submit it right to College Board, and they will approve it really quickly. Somebody asked, where do we find the pacing guide? I can show you that real quick. So when you're logged in, so you're in the dashboard. I love to do a quick find. Of course, the pacing guide's not on the quick find.
Yeah, we just we just redid our navigation, so this is all new to everyone. But should be over, so we're looking for the pacing guide.
Mhm.
I think it would be down under curriculum.
That's what
Leanne,
Resources?
Are you looking for the syllabus
No, the pacing guide.
for AP CSA? Go to the hub. Try the hub. Keep scrolling down. And the AP hubs is the bottom under curriculum.
Missing it. The website just went through like a huge overhaul, so I'm still learning how to navigate through all the new cool stuff that they added.
I can take a look around, and when I find it, I will let you know, and then I'll post the link in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So when it comes to submitting your course audit, if you're new or have never done it before, you have to submit the course audit form. CodeHS does have an audit form for guidance. If you've already been authorized as a CSA teacher, your administrator can just renew your course. So it makes it a little easier for you. And so here's the link to the AP audit for this course. That way, you don't have to worry about it. You can just download it, submit it to College Board, and then usually your administrator has to like approve it and stuff. So make sure you remind your administrators to do this. Mine forgot one year until we were like 2 months into the school year, and I was like, "Hey, you remember that thing I asked you to do? Like, I kind of need you to do it now because we have to order AP test." So make sure, or if it's not your administrator, if it's your counselor, whoever is in charge of taking care of your AP stuff, make sure they know what they're doing and how to do that. Okay. Questions? Good.
I think we're good on questions. Yeah, the pacing is in the syllabus, but I'll look and see if we still have that one pager available.
I was like, I know it's in there somewhere because I have it downloaded and it's literally like in my plan book, so I know. All right, so a little bit about the exam. I'm not gonna go super crazy into the exam, but a little bit about it. So the AP test does cost, it's around just under $100 for your students. This for my kids, because of where I teach, can sometimes be really difficult for students to come up with that $100, and I don't want to ask parents, and I'm always so afraid a kid won't take it because they're worried about the cost of the exam. And so I fundraise with my students. I'm very lucky in that I have lots of 3D printers in my classroom, and so we actually create cute little 3D figurines that we sell. We're a combined K-12 school, so we sell it a lot to the little kids. But we do a lot of fundraising, and so that I cover the cost of the AP test for my students. And so one thing I do is I do make them sign a contract. Parents have to sign it as well. And it's just that they're going to stay on top of their assignments. They have to maintain a 75 or better, which studies have shown that, that's the minimum really score that they could have in the class to achieve a passing score on the test. They have to make sure that they take the AP test and adhere to all the testing instructions given by the AP coordinator. And then if for some reason we find out that they cheated on any portion of the exam itself, which is really difficult to do when they're in a room, but you never know. Kids are very smart nowadays. This was mostly back when AP CSP, they had to submit their create task and stuff. And College Board found out a lot of kids were using AI to do their written responses. So I just make my parents and students sign this. I also have my principal sign it. So everybody's on the same page when it comes to expectations for taking an AP course. And so for me, this just kind of covers me to make sure that everybody knows what's expected. So the exam is broken down into two sections, both equally weighted at 50%. They have a multiple choice section, which is 40 questions. It takes an hour and a half. Then they have the free response questions. And so those are 4 questions that they have to answer, where they get an additional hour and a half. And so they get asked on methods and control structures, classes, arrays and array lists, and then 2D arrays. So if you've had your students do those labs inside of CodeHS, they're going to feel very familiar when it comes to responding to those FRQs. And there are lots of practice FRQs for your kids to do throughout the year. And don't skip those because it is half of their exam score. So the multiple choice test is broken down to include topics like programming fundamentals, those data structures, logic, algorithms, and problem solving, some object-oriented programming, and recursion. And so when it comes down to the weighting, the big 2 you're going to see are Unit 3 and Unit 4. Those account for anywhere between 15 and 17.5% of the exam, all the way up to 22.5% of the exam. So these are the big 2 that you want to spend the most time with for your students. I would not skip anything in these units just because it is a big portion of the exam, almost 40% in total. And then each of the other units broken down by how much they're weighted on that exam. And so this just gives your students an idea like which units they need to focus on the hardest, especially when it comes to reviewing. So those free response questions are testing them to solve problems with more extended reasoning. It does take them a lot of time. I always tell my students, you're going to want to spend at least 20 minutes on every question. But if they find that they're spending more than 20 minutes, they need to take a break and go back to answering that particular question, just because I've had students in the past tell me I didn't finish my FRQ because I got stuck on FRQ 2. And I'm like, oh, great. So you just missed half of the FRQs. And so I always kind of have them practice breaking those down so that they're not spending too much time on one FRQ in particular, because it is going to take time. So this is an example of a FRQ question that your students might get. So write an implementation of the climbing club method. So add climb that stores the climb info objects in the order they were added. This implementation of add climb should create a new climb info object with the given name and time. It appends a reference to that object to the end of climb list. For example, consider the following code segment. And then when the code segment has completed executing, the instance variable climb list would contain the following entries. And so your kids actually have to write kind of some pseudocode for how this would look on their end. And so giving them lots of practice, helping them feel more confident when they're writing this. My students always want to know, why am I being forced to write? This is a computer science class. And, trust me, the first time they ever misspell something in coding and then their code doesn't work because of one misspelling, they're going to realize why their English classes were so important when it comes to spelling and making sure everything is punctuated correctly. I can't tell you how many times I'm like trying to code something. I'm like, oh, what is going wrong? And it's always that semicolon at the end that is completely thrown off my entire code. So telling them, that, hey, English is a fact of life. So College Board does provide you with scoring guidelines so the students can practice this and see, where they're going to score when it comes to their FRQs. And so for question 1, they're being asked, did they create a new climb info using data from parameters and append to the climb list, and then how they get each of the points broken down. Oh, jump too fast. And then for part B is 6 points. And so it's broken down. Did they create it? Did they use parametric data? Do they compare the value with retrieved data from the object list? And then do they insert objects into the list based on the comparison? So they're looking for those comparisons. So believe it or not, when they are scoring the AP CSA exam, syntax is actually really a lot less important than conceptually understanding programming. And so believe it or not, they don't penalize your students if they kind of have just extra code, spelling or case discrepancies where it's not like we totally didn't know where they were going with that. Lots of different ways. If they use a keyword used as an identifier, if they use mathematical symbols, brackets, different types of brackets, using one equal sign instead of two. So College Board really, yeah. So somebody said, it will mess it up. Yeah, that's why I said if there's no ambiguity. Otherwise, you know, they will get a penalty if their access is confusing, if they have extraneous code, which causes lots of side effects. Local variables used but not declared, destruction of persistent data, and then void methods or constructors that return a value. So otherwise, no penalty for lots of things, but penalties if for some reason it does cause your code to actually mess up. Sorry if I misspoke. Nothing in the Q&A.
We had a couple things, but we're kind of answering them as we go. So I think we're pretty good right now. I can go
I'm gonna
ahead
go through.
Oh,
Are we
I
good?
was gonna
Sorry.
say, I could go ahead and put that link again in for the section that we created, just in case they would like to take a look at a CSA unit in the section that we put you in. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pop that into the chat one more time. If anybody wants to. Again, you can just follow along if you would like. You don't have to go into the section to do this. It's up to you.
You do have two options when it comes to how you want to break down your lessons. So you have two options. You can do it, students can do it at their own pace. There are lots of videos in CodeHS to help them go through each of the different lessons that are all structured as mini lectures, or you can use the slides yourself and go through it. One of the things I like to is some of my students want to work ahead like crazy. I lock them so that they can only stay in the unit we're currently in because I don't want them to get too far ahead. I have some overachievers that just want to zoom through the course and then they get confused because they went through it too fast. So you can lock them into the current unit so they don't get out. The big difference between Mocha and Nitro, Nitro is approved by College Board. Mocha is not. So that's the big difference between the two. And the biggest difference, at least for me. All right, so all of CodeHS's exercises are short, formative problems that reinforce all the new concepts. They do have starter code that lets them focus on this. So lots of, like, there's usually at least one or two or more examples for your students to look at first in order to reinforce. They do have anywhere from 1 to 5 exercises, and depending on how complicated those exercises are will depend on how long your students are going to take to do it. One of the things I do in my class in particular is I move the quiz to the end. So even though on, for example, like unit 1 on primitive types, so if we're looking at like variables and data types, I always move the check for understanding to the very end. And that's just because I use it as a formative assessment, aside from the actual coding exercises to see where my students were at the end. You can also use it as like a check. Did they watch the video? How much were they paying attention? If you did it as a lecture versus them having individually watched the videos, it's up to you. So on this one, I would move it down after 1.2.5. And then since this one is broken down into kind of really two sections, I would just move that check for understanding. And those are just for your students to kind of get an idea. They're pretty short, only a couple of questions for your kids to answer. And then I just tell my kids like, hey, this is just a quick check-in for me to see if like I need to go back and reteach you, especially if they get a really low score. But I don't allow them to like retake it or anything because it's just a formative assessment. It depends on whether or not I'm going to use videos or mini lectures. It's based on how big my class is at the time, or so this is going to sound crazy. I teach at a really small school, very small. So my class sizes can range from 3 to like 20. Just depends on the year. Sometimes I'm asked to teach 2 or 3 classes at the same time. And so this year I'm teaching AP CSP, Advanced Computer Science 1, and AP CSA in the same class period. So this year I will have them do the videos because I cannot physically do all 3 of those things at the same time. So I'm going to rely heavily on the videos this year for my students, just because I'm also going to be having to work with 2 other classes simultaneously. And I think right now I'm sitting at like 23 kids between those 3 classes. So yeah, I'm going to use the videos a lot this year. In the past, I've always done the lecture. And then I go through the lecture and the examples with my students. And then with about 10 minutes left to go in class, I make them do the quiz, and then we review the quiz together as well. We're going to see how that's going to work this year with 3 classes going on simultaneously. It's going to be rough. It's going to be so much fun. So much fun. Thank you. It's going to be interesting this year. I've never taught 2 AP classes simultaneously, so I'm going to learn to juggle like crazy this year. But depending on how your class is structured and how your students do, like I said, I usually really love to do the mini lectures because I like to go through it with my students, answer any clarifying questions. This year, I'm going to have them do the videos, and then I'm going to use the videos, like I'm going to put them in a slide and then have them answer a couple questions with the video using like Pear Deck in order to kind of collect and see where my students are while I'm managing 3 classes at the same time. Because luckily I can walk around with my iPad and check and see which of ones the 3 classes are doing and who kind of needs more help and things like that. So I'm gonna master the art of juggling this year. Oh, kudos, Leanne. It's gonna be rough this year. 2 AP classes in the same time, but it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Positivity. All right, so we're gonna have a quick little break. What do you think, Robin? Like 5-10 minutes?
5 minutes should be good. So
5
what
minutes.
is it? 8 after?
Yep.
So lucky 13 after we'll come back.
Lucky 13. If you guys have more questions, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Yep, pop them into the chat. Cool. All right, 13 after.
Yeah. Leanne, I may have to email you and be like, how did you do it? Because adding in that 2 classes, I probably would have been okay. Adding that 3rd class in at the same time, I'm like, okay, this is gonna be great.
It was a challenge with both of the APs, but I did do a lot of self-paced and go back and forth like you had said.
Yeah.
And my focus honestly was on AP CSP most of the time because my CSA students already knew how to take a test, knew how to prepare. They had been prepared from the previous year. So they were mostly all seniors too, and I let them do a little bit more self-paced than the sophomores and juniors. I had to keep on track in AP CSP.
Yeah, I'm looking, my AP CSA kids are all, like you said, seniors. And most of them, this is their 3rd programming class, plus they have to take a semester long computer applications and computer literacy class as sophomores. So most of them have like a lot of coding experience. So they're pretty independent. And I think I have all those kids 3 periods in a row. So by the time we get to CSA, they're going to be like, okay, break. What are we doing next? So it's going to be fun. I think I have 8 or 9 preps this year. So it's going to be a doozy.
Randy, do you remember where you got that pacing guide last year?
Swore it was in with the teaching resources, like in with the curriculum, like under resources.
Oh.
Is it at the top, where, let me see, AP Java resources, the third thing down? Yeah. All right, we've got about 1 more minute till break time is over.
And I had to get it from somewhere because we screenshotted it. And now it breaks it down in the syllabus.
You know what? I just looked back at that. It's slide number 24 that we were taking a look at where it says recommended pacing, and it's actually a table that has all of
Oh.
it in it. It's not a screenshot. So I wonder if we just put that in there. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know if you look at the syllabus, it breaks it down for like how long everything should take. I swear there was a pace.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It's 13 after, so we are going to go ahead and get started. If you're following along on the slides, we are all the way up to slide 44.
Now we're going down the rabbit hole. Where is that pacing? So yeah, for the pacing, you can just look at the syllabus and then break it down from there. That would probably be the easiest way. Okay. Yeah, definitely look at the syllabus. Another thing too, if you go into on the left-hand side where it says curriculum and then you click on resources, they do have a lot of additional materials, which are super helpful. Like that, first week of school lesson plans to get your kids going. My kids have all gone to school together since kindergarten. So we actually start learning day 2 because it's not the first, I think maybe one class a year. I might have a couple students who I've never had in the past. So most of my kids know each other really well. So I skipped that part. But there's like a really cool back to school guide, that can help you out, how to structure a class period. Which I love because it just helps, break it down if you're not sure how to structure your class lesson plans and things like that. They also have a notebook template, which is really great for your students to take notes on the different units. I use these with my students digitally. So each lesson, I'll attach this into Google Classroom and they are required to take notes. You can also print a bunch of these for your students and have them do it in a notebook, or you can just get like a composition notebook and have them create something similar. It is really important to work out like how to do the diagrams, how to do the pseudocode, just because, they're going to be required to do that on the exam. So I highly recommend the note taker. Just an FYI. So some progress checks you want to do with your students just to get them prepped for that AP test is using those progress checks inside of AP Classroom. Obviously it's going to be College Board's release questions. So that, they're going to be the ones. Make sure they're doing not just the multiple choice questions, but those practice FRQs, and that you're grading and responding and giving them lots of feedback and using College Board's rubric as well. That way they get really familiar with how to read and understand the rubric, and then you do too. And then once you've been doing AP CSA for a few years, I highly recommend becoming an AP reader. 1, you get paid for it. 2, you get professional development hours for it. So if your state requires that for relicensing, it's a win-win. I am an AP reader for CSP, and I always learn so much from, just getting to really deep dive into the rubric as a scorer. So I highly recommend that. And so take time to review them. You can't like officially grade it, which is fine. But you can totally give them feedback and stuff like that. But it's worth it just to give your kids practice, things like that. So College Board is really nitpicky about like, you can't score it. Like when my kids in CSP do their create task, I cannot score it. It's just like, yay, did you turn it in? Great. But if you're doing like little, like mini FRQs with your kids, you can, give them some definite feedback. Like I said, at the end of your unit, there are exams in CodeHS. All of them are using AP Classroom questions. So you don't have to worry about, are they going to be aligned? You can add in those FRQs on your test. So for example, inside your classroom, you can go into your course. It loads, sorry. And then you can also search for additional, and it'll give you all of these pre-recommended things that you can add to your students. Make sure you're assigning those AP test practices, the additional exercises as well. And you can, preview any of those. So like the AP test practice, for example, gives them some free responses at the different levels for question 1, 2. And so definitely add those in for your students. Give them some practice questions. For me, that's a must. And then there are some additional exercises you can give for your students to go along with the additional units if you think your kids need more time. So for me, I don't let my students go back in and like just re-click on answers in the test. I don't feel like they learn anything from that. So if I see that there are a couple of questions on, that they've missed, I'll go in and I will add additional lessons that they have to do in order to remediate their test. So if you're in your course assignments for the class, all you have to do to get those supplemental materials is scroll down to the bottom. And then if you just click search for content, supplemental materials is the very first thing that pops up. So you can do any of the things that CodeHS is already like, hey, here are some things that, you probably will want to do with your students. I do, because obviously there's about a month from the time the AP test is until the end of the year. And I don't just want my students sitting around doing nothing. If there's labs that we didn't get to at the beginning of the year, I'll assign them some fun labs and things like that. There's also a community content, so you can actually see what other teachers have done. Oh, sorry, Shannon. Yeah, if you're in your teacher one, you can see it. The kids can't see it, thankfully. So you can also click on community content. And so other teachers have started to give you at least different scenarios, different, problems that you can give your students. There are different quiz banks that you can assign your students as well. So all you're doing is you're just helping and sharing things with other teachers, which I love. I always look here if I want to add something, just because why reinvent the wheel? We are all so busy. So you can also do so if you really like this question, you can just click add it to quiz and you can pick which quiz you want it added to. It's so easy. Just to add it with your students. So, if you want to add this question, you just click add. And because I don't have anything in my playlist, I can't right now, but you can do it on your Create page. So nice and easy, super fun. So some of the multiple choice question strategies I always use is tracing code. So I always use tease charts so that my students can track the value of variables and see how they're being used. They also have check edge cases. So most errors and problems occur on the upper and lower bounds of loops. And so the students can check the comparison operators and how just, missing out on that equal sign can change their program so much. And then of course, test taking strategies. Some people, AP CSA is their first, like if they didn't necessarily have to take CSP, CSA might be their first one. So just going through some good test taking and question reading strategies with students. So like answers that are obviously incorrect. And so most of the time you can eliminate 50% of your choices just based on ones you're like, okay, well, I know it's not absolutely those. And just getting them to understand how AP structures their questions. That's why do not skip the end of unit exams and then going over those with your students afterwards, just because sometimes they end up getting it wrong just because they misread the question. And so taking that time to go over it with your students is really important, just because, a lot of times nobody's ever taught them how to actually take a test or how to actually break down those questions. I was in a test with a bunch of other adults and they were like, oh yeah, the answer to this question is this. And I was like, well, no, it's not, because if you actually read the question, it's asking you this. And they were like, oh my God, you're right. And I'm like, how many adults don't even know test taking strategies like that? So inside of CodeHS, they do have the Java quick reference sheet. And so I post this in my Google Classroom. When I do physical notebooks for my kids, it's the first thing I print, and they always have it up with their coding. It just gives them some quick little like, hey, here's what these do, because it's complex. And a lot of times they forget. They're all like, oh God, how do I do this again? I'm like, well, did you check your reference sheet? And they're like, oh, there it is. So make sure you have this handy for your kids. If you have access to print this huge in your classroom, like take up a whole wall in your classroom if you can, because this will save you so much time. You just have to, point to the reference sheet. If I could, I would. If I had a space in my classroom, I would totally print this and make it huge. And then, so make sure they're reading through the entire class before they start it. Do lots, as much as possible. Because even if they don't get all their credit on an FRQ, even some of the credit is enough to get them that passing score. And so make sure you're focusing on concepts over syntax, which is really hard for me as an English teacher. I'm always like, oh God, the spelling, but honestly, it's not the end all be all. All right, so I'm going to go through a sample lesson with you really quick. Kind of break it down for how I do it with my students. All right, so we're going to be doing Unit 1, Lesson 1, which is pretty much where you're going to start with your kids. CodeHS does offer a pretest. I do give my kids that pretest at the beginning of the year because as part of my teacher evaluation, we have to do some kind of like standardized test with our kids. And because I don't teach math or English, I don't actually have a standardized test for my coding class. And it's too late in the year to look at my AP scores. So I actually use that pre-test as my like growth for the year with my students. And so I give them this test at the beginning of the year, and then they take the test again at the end of April before their AP test, just to see how much they've grown and how much they've learned. So this pre-test is a really good one. So if you want to use it, I highly recommend it. It's just a good, how did they do? All right, so this lesson in particular is broken down depending on how you prefer to do it. You can either have them watch the video, which I'm going to show you guys real quick. And you have two options for the video, depending on how your district does things. My district blocks a lot of stuff on YouTube. And so I always have my kids watch it through
Welcome to AP
CodeHS.
Computer Science in Java. In this lesson,
Let me know if you can't hear this. Zoom is weird about audio.
we'll cover some main Java topics. Let's get started. When you create a new file on CodeHS, this is the initial skeleton that will be created. There are a couple of components here that we will discuss to make this a little easier to understand. The first part of the skeleton is the program class. We will learn more about this in Unit 2, but for now, all you need to know is that all of the code in a Java file must be encompassed in the programs class. We wrap everything in the class program by enclosing it all in a pair of curly brackets. We also place the brackets on the line below the class so as to make the code easier to read and debug later down the road. An important thing to note is that the name of the class must match the name of the Java file. If the name of the class doesn't match the name of the file, it will cause an error and the program will not run. The second component that's vital to the Java file skeleton is the main method. The main method is the point from which most Java programs start their execution. The main method will read any code that is written between the curly brackets and execute that code as written. If the main method is not included in the class, the system will throw an error, indicating that the main method needs to be included in order for the program to run. Now that we understand the skeleton of a Java program, we can start creating them. One thing we can include in the main method is a print statement. Print statements are used to print calculations, messages, alerts, and other output to the console for users to see. The system class method, println, is broken up into two components.
Okay, so kind of get the hint with the video. Your students can speed it up if they want to. There's also a note taker built into it, which is so nice. I love the note taker.
The first is the
Students.
class method.
And then, of course, you can also turn on closed captioning. This is really great. I had a deaf student one year, so the closed captioning saved me. Also, because of accessibility and ADA and stuff, it's a nice feature to have. So like I said, I have my students do the quiz at the very end. To edit this, you can just click on the three dots and then you can just move it down all the way to the bottom. If you feel like your kids are taking too long with something, you can always have them, you can delete some of the exercises, but it is kind of scaffolded. They do get more difficult as they go through. So don't just always take off the ones at the end. Those are the really challenging ones that you want your students to do. So I may usually, if I see they're taking too long, I might remove one of the middle ones. So quiz, nice and short. This one only has 4 questions for your kids to do. Nice and short. But then always run through the examples. I put these up on the screen for my students. So it tells the kids, hey, this is an example, play around, run the code, see how it works. When you're done, just continue on to the next problem. And so if this is your first time ever plopping into CodeHS, they do have docs. So this is just some little hints for your students. They have examples. And stuff. So since this is an example, it won't actually give you one. This is where your students will be able to get their grading history and their feedback, super helpful. And then they can also go back and see their history, which I've had students where all of a sudden, their code all of a sudden disappears or something gets messed up and they have to go back. So being able to view that history is really nice. So in this one, on the output, they can just click run. And so they see, okay, I've got this hello world, and then all it's going to do is print line. And so you can obviously change this. Be like, features, and then to run to make sure it works. And so all they have to do is click next. In your grading, as you see this, it changes color based on like, did they just look at it? Did they actually complete it? So it's all color coded. It's nice and easy. I can see exactly where my students, stopped, how long it took them to do things. And it just helps me with my planning. So in this one, it's showing your students, okay, here's how you do different print lines and stuff. I always show my students how to do comments, just because it helps them. So if something doesn't work right, they know where in their code to look for those issues with the debugging. And so gives them some tips and pointers. And so if you guys want to practice, you can actually do 1.1.5, which is welcome Java. And so you're going to introduce yourself, print out 2 lines to the screen using the system out print line. And then state your name, second line, what's your favorite hobby? And so it should look like this. And so your students can do it. And if they're like, wait, what was I supposed to do? All they have to do is click on assignment and it'll remind them like, hey, this is what you were supposed to do. And I like this because, so there are a couple of things you can do in settings. One thing I disable right away is copy paste. I do not allow my kids to copy and paste things in just because I'm so worried about cheating. So that is a setting you can turn off for your students. It's inside of your course settings.
And that is a pro
It's a
feature.
pro feature. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you have pro, you can disable copy and paste. It's so worth it. I do love my pro account. I'm very spoiled. And stuff. But if you're worried about copy and paste, you can, if you have pro, you can tell them not to copy and paste. Or like in the beginning, I mean, how much is the pro version? It depends. You have to contact CodeHS. It depends on your like class sizes and how many classes you're doing and stuff like that. I don't want to like misquote it. I don't even know how much it costs because I don't pay for it. My district pays for it. So I have no idea what they pay. It's a good question. I maybe should ask that one day. Ooh, yeah. Thanks, Robin. But if you don't have copy and paste, if your kids are forgetting things, they can just copy the code. Yep, anything that comes after. Okay. So your kids can print. So your kids
Yeah.
can.
For the copy and paste too, obviously it prevents them from copying outside of CodeHS and pasting into it. It would also prevent them from copying their own code and pasting it someplace else within their program. Yes.
Yeah, which if they're building on things, a lot of times it'll carry over what they've already done, so they don't need to necessarily copy and paste. But I'm so afraid of them. And like CodeHS does a really good job. Like they verify you're a teacher before you can get access to the teacher side of things. But kids these days, definitely try to find sneaky ways to avoid things. Oh, there are tons of differences between pro in terms of the grade book. Like specifically, I just know my grade book. Like I can, it syncs with my Google Classroom really seamlessly. It auto grades. I'm pretty sure if you don't have pro, your grade book is super limited. Robin may have to give the details on that. I know my grade book does everything.
Yeah,
It does imported Canvas.
Yeah, I just popped a link into the chat that goes through the differences and what it looks like grading in free versus pro if you wanted to take a look.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So if you're using free, you can look at student submissions one at a time. You can also see their quizzes, once again, one at a time. But if you have the pro feature, it has an auto grader, saves my bacon. I cannot even explain because it's so nice because it auto grades everything. It has a fast grading feature, which is really nice. And then this is what your grade book looks like, which I'm a sucker for some color coding because I teach 8, 9 different classes in a year. I have to have things color coded. I'm just a visual person. And so anything in this beautiful turquoise color is completed. Anything in green is usually like needs to be reviewed. Yellow is like they're still working on it. Gray means they didn't even open it. So it's really important to know that. If you have Pro, you can give a retake. You can even print the quiz. So like if you're a kid who just for some reason can't do it online, it's really nice. You can see the breakdown of all the quiz scores. Like I said, I love the Pro feature. For me, it's so worth it. I love it. Okay. Oh, yeah. So another thing, if you mess something up, it'll kind of tell you like, hey, you know, this happened, but then this happened. So I do love the fact that it'll throw up those errors for you. I love it. You can even do test cases. So you can check it. It's like, nope, you messed up. Once again, it's always that semicolon. I wasn't done, so it's fine. Can be mad at me. So you can check it and it'll tell you like, hey, you have to have 2 lines. Yours only had 1. Here's the difference. It should have done this. And so it lets your kids know what they need to go back and fix. I always tell my kids, like, if you have to do the test case, like make sure it's working because there are several places they'll have to go where they have to code it based on different scenarios. So that's really important. You can keep playing with 1.1.5. So, and all of these you can totally play around with them. I usually know my kids, a lot of them, like I said, this is not their first programming class. They could easily do this in one class period. There are some that are bigger, some obviously that are smaller that are going to require you to take more time with your students. As you go through the first unit, you kind of get a feel for how fast your kids are working and how long it's going to take them, but make sure you're not letting them take too crazy long on certain things because you don't want to run into running out of time towards the AP test. Any questions? So some best practices, I definitely would have your students keep a notebook. That's where they can keep their notes, their vocabulary, things like that. It's up to you on whether or not you want to do this digitally or on paper. Somebody asked, do I skip some of the challenges? Yes, because sometimes I'm crunched for time. If, you know, my kids are just taking too long, sometimes, yes, I will get rid of some of the challenges. It's usually one of the ones in the middle. If I think a couple of the challenges are too similar, in the interest of time, yeah, I definitely will skip some of them. And if you want to skip them, all you have to do is click on the 3 dots. Like, say, for example, I wanted to remove this one, I can just remove it. Also, sometimes I'll tell my kids like, hey, for extra practice, I want you to do this one, but it's optional. Not that, but like we're not allowed to do extra credit for our kids. But if you're allowed to do extra credit in your class, you may want to, you know, say, hey, at minimum, you have to do this one. Otherwise, you know, it's extra credit. But yeah, you can definitely skip some of the challenges. That's not a problem. You know, at least I usually make them do, depending on how long they are. Some of them are really short. So like, for example, 1.4, definitely have them do both. There's only 2. They're not that time consuming. But on like the first one, you can be like, hey, I want you to do, you know, the first one and the last one, and then pick one of the ones in the middle for extra practice at minimum. So that's just up to you on how you want to do it. All right. Also make sure you're checking in with your kids, especially if you have a lot of students in your class. Either weekly if you can, once every other week, once per unit. I have my kids do like a check-in day where it's kind of like a catch-up day. I do it once per unit. It's usually before the test. And so during that time, they're usually doing some kind of test review on Kahoot, or something like that, and that's just so that they can have time. If they're behind on something, they can catch up before the exam. That we can also use it as an AP review day as things get closer. Usually I start that in January. And it's just where I can sit and meet with every student. I maybe only spend 2-3 minutes with, each kid, unless I'm really concerned or they're falling behind, then I'll spend a little bit more time with them. But just making sure I have a chat with them. How are you feeling? What are some issues you're having in the class? What are some things you think you're doing well? And then, we'll kind of do that, 2 things I think you're doing well, 1 thing I'd wish you'd, work a little harder on. And 1 thing that they do have in the resources that you can use with your students is a goal setting document that I do use with my kids. It's in the resources under additional materials. And I have them do a goal setting every unit. So we do it at the beginning of the unit and then we review it. So what did they know going into the unit? What do they hope to learn? I change this up. And so I do at the end of every unit, they have to do this. How's this going to help me in the future? Most of my kids go into a particular job field after high school. We're a mining community, so a lot of our kids go into mining, and programming is, believe it or not, a huge part of mining. And so a lot of our kids want to go into like programming autonomous trucks and things like that for our mining, because it's a really lucrative job. And so a lot of them, that's where they want to go. And so we talk about, how will your programming get you there? What are some things you still need to work on to be successful? And then we have people in their career field come in and talk to them about that. And then what do they need to do to meet their goals? And then what do I need from other people to meet my goals? Sorry about the dogs. And so usually that's, I'm the other person usually that they're talking about. So it's like, what do I need from my teacher? Like, do you need more time? Do you feel like you need more exercises to practice this? So I make them do this during every unit. And it's just a way for when I do that check-in with them, I have like concrete things that they wanted to go over. And I look at it right in the beginning and be like, okay, like this kid feels like they're going to struggle with this. How can I help them facilitate that? So just different ways to help your kids out. It's just build relationships too, especially if you don't have your kids year after year like I do. So it just helps them, check in with you and, see how they're doing. Academic dishonesty is a huge problem. I don't care what subject you teach, unless you're a PE teacher. I don't think there's a way to be academically dishonest. Well, actually, you probably could be dishonest in PE. I don't want to assume, but by doing those check-ins, you're going to definitely know what your students' level of understanding is. I've had to kick a kid out of my class because they've been caught cheating 1 too many times. Like on the first time we have a chat, second time, there are going to be consequences. Third time, like you're done. Maybe when you're more emotionally mature. CodeHS does offer time tracking. So this is a pro feature that they have, another pro feature. It'll actually let you know like how long or how your kids are doing on it. So teal is finalized. Dark magenta, this kind of really, really pinky color, is if they turned it in late, because you can assign due dates. Pink means it's been submitted, it's been a review, but isn't fully correct, and they need to like fix it. Green means it's submitted, everything's good. Yellow is they looked at it but aren't done with it and stuff. And then no opened is great. And so you can also change it. It'll show you like what percent they've completed, which is really great. But then time tracking. This is vital because it tells you exactly how long your students actually spent on that assignment. So like on this one, it'll tell you what the average person spends on this. So for this particular one, okay, like the welcome program that we were working on, most students on average spend about 21 minutes on this very first assignment. So if you have a kid who spent under 2 minutes on it, Okay, you can kind of go like, okay, that's kind of strange. But then as you go along and you see like things that would take somebody half an hour, almost 45 minutes to do, your kid is only spending about a minute on, that's some red flags. And so it just helps you be a little mindful of. Same thing with if you see a student that took way longer, like maybe check in with that student, see what's going on. And stuff. Maybe they struggled with something. Maybe they just left their computer on and like took a snack break or went to the bathroom for 20 minutes, like high schoolers tend to do sometimes. So this time tracker really lets you see how long your students are spending on things. And I check in with that, you know, as I'm grading every single assignment, like how are kids doing? It's just another way for you to get an idea of how your kids are doing. Okay, when it comes to Chat GPT, don't get me wrong, I love Chat GPT. I've used it for so many things and I'm like, oh my God, this thing is so amazing. Also, not the most accurate. We were reading a book and I was like, oh man, I kind of wanted to like, will Chat GPT give me like a summary of this book just so I can like take notes and don't have to create my own summary. Didn't even like, it tried to give me a summary, but then gave me so much wrong information about the book we were reading. They were like, oh yeah, such and such character dies. And I was like, that character doesn't die in the book. Like they live throughout the whole thing. So I have conversations with my students all the time. Chat GPT is a great tool. And can we use it when we're struggling with something? Yes. You know, I've used it before where I'm like, oh my God, I want to code this, but I don't have any idea. Like, what would be some starter code for this? Totally fine. Can it code your whole program every single time? Absolutely not. That's not okay. That's cheating. And so definitely have conversations with your kids. You can show them how to use Chat GPT and other kinds of AI in ways that are helpful, not cheating. So make sure you're having those conversations with your kids. So important. AI is not going anywhere. Any questions that I missed? Cool. All right. So lots of AP review on CodeHS as well as AP Classroom. So the review course has lots of practice problems, quizzes, things like that that your students can use. College Board has their own. You can assign things by topic that go along with your unit. This could be great if your students don't do well on the CodeHS test. They could do some additional review to kind of earn those points back. On College Board's website, lots of different ways other than just them retaking the same test, which is fine too. I just want them to, you know, get as much familiarity with those multiple choice questions as possible. AP Classroom also has videos that can be used to help reinforce the concepts. They're usually about 8 minutes long. They're always taught by a teacher. You can actually assign these to students also as a review, which is really helpful. There are lots of progress checks and quizzes on College Board's website. You can create your own assessments or use their pre-created progress checks. It's up to you. I tend to use their pre-created progress ones just because I don't have a whole lot of time to create those on my own. But if you do, good job. Post those so we can all benefit from your creation. I'm sure about this anything. All right. So in the resource hub on CodeHS, so many things I cannot even begin to tell you. So it's under curriculum. There's the resource hub, lots of different things for you to use with your students, help you. So on the AP hub, one of the things I absolutely love is question of the day. It's one of my favorite things. It gets emailed to me and it's kind of my quiz for the morning, like, ooh, can I do the question of the day? So these are going to be starting soon. You can kind of see there's no release ones yet. But you can sign up for question of the day. I use these as kind of my warm up as like a pre-AP question. It's so much fun. There's also some FRQ samples, so many FRQ samples that you could be looking at. And then best thing ever, you can assign it to your class to help them with their exam. There's also a textbook that CodeHS has because Lord knows we don't have the funding. We can't afford a textbook for this class. So they have a textbook that's already assigned. You can have your kids do this as homework. where they can read the section that they're going to be working on, and then take notes ahead of time in your class, which is super great. Just one less thing you have to worry about if your administrators like must assign homework. You can assign this pre-reading to your students, which is awesome. Ooh, can you answer it in period 1? Clear the answers for another section for the question of the day. I embed mine in a Google slide and use Pear Deck. So yes, I can. But I mean, you could also do it as like a Google form if you want to have it like delineated by class periods. There's lots of ways to do it where you can embed those questions of the day.
Can you show them on the left-hand side? It should be.
Oh, how to get there?
Yeah, it should.
Yeah, so it's under
I see it.
curriculum. It's on the left-hand side. It's the very last thing under curriculum. It's AP Hub.
Oh, and then can you show them right above that, the question of the day? It's on the left now. I
It's
know
on the left.
everything's changed, but if you scroll down where you were on the left.
Oh, on the toolbar.
Yep.
Question
So
of the day.
yeah, there you go.
Yep. So you can view their question of the days. These were.
Yeah, they get released in September when we think most schools have started, so that it comes out when we think everybody will be like covering that topic.
Yeah. So they'll start those in September, but you can totally kind of see. Oh, should I have them up? Just some sample ones, just because, oh, here's a sample one. So like a JavaScript question of the day, this was from May. Your students can post it and you can like go back and see what the other ones were, which are super great. So if you want to see like 5/16s, which of the options properly calls a function? So I know that's not correct, but they can click on that and be like, oh no. I swear I knew that was in. So I was like, that is fine. But yeah, your students can do it. I love the questions of the day. Just because it's a fun, easy way for me to get a warm up for my students, just to get some more practice with their AP questions. Super fun. Which was funny. The very next slide, question of the day. So great. And so it does kind of track where it thinks you should be based on the pacing of the course. So it usually does align really well with my lessons, which I love. So like your question in September, what will the following code output? Yes, it does follow the pace of the curriculum. Yeah. So based on what it thinks you're going to be doing on that given day, the question of the day is aligned to where CodeHS thinks you're going to be in the curriculum. And I've never had it be super off. It's usually not because I'm a 4-day school, so I am a little different pace than everybody else. I'm always a little off. But usually it's like something my kids are within the same unit. So it's not a big deal for them. I'll usually go back a couple of days on the question of the day just because I know I'm not in the same one. Because not having Fridays makes my pacing a little different. So also, like I said, you have that FRQ center inside of the hub. So you can see, and it's right up at the top, upper right-hand corner, where you can give those different ones and then you can assign them to your students. Super easy. You can also give them extra practice, which is amazing. So you have the practice tab. And so you can, if you want to assign your kids, like I said, if they're having an issue, with a particular concept, you can assign them extra help tasks. And then of course it's based on different levels. If they're really having an issue at like a level 1, and stuff, you can assign them a level 1 question, or if like they're just having a hard time getting like the more advanced concepts, you can assign them some more advanced practice, which is really great. Always good to give your kids more practice. There's the textbook I was talking about. Love the textbook. Totally assign it for homework. Have my kids. So that way, when they come in the next day, they know exactly what we're going to be covering. So you have the course hub and stuff that has all the different practices. There are lots of message groups. If you're not on the CSA Facebook group, highly recommend. People post things all the time that are so helpful. There have been teachers that post like different review things. Even if you're like stuck on something, you can absolutely post it into Facebook. People aren't judgy. They're like, hey, listen, we're all in here doing the best we can. So please, please, please join the different groups. It's totally worth it. There's a CodeHS educators Facebook group for teachers that are just strictly using CodeHS. So if you ever have questions about the platform and stuff like that or something, you can post it in there. Super helpful.
All right. So we have a few minutes left, about 5 minutes left. So if you do have any more questions for Brandy, keep typing those in and we will make sure to answer those before we leave. In the meantime, a couple of things I wanted to go over with you. We have a new AP CSP course that uses Roblox. And if you would like to apply, and maybe that's a course that you would like to use, it has been approved by the College Board. There are some benefits that you would get if you apply and you are chosen to be a sponsored teacher. I did put that link in the chat for you. And then if you go to the next slide. And then you can also become a CodeHS certified educator. You can get micro credentials. And Brandy talked about our Facebook group. So we do have the CodeHS educators Facebook group. There's also the CSA group that you could join. So check us out on any of your social media avenues. And then if you could go to the next slide. We do have just a brief survey that we would like you to take to let us know how we did. And if we gave you the information that you were looking for, we would greatly appreciate that. And I'm also going to pop into the chat, just in case you came in a little bit late, I'm going to pop into the chat the certificate of completion link. So this is basically like your attendance link. So I put that in the chat for you. Remember, before you click on that attendance link, you will want to make sure that you are logged into CodeHS. Otherwise, that link is not going to work. And then if you could go to the next slide. Thank you for signing up for this free PD. We are still going throughout the summer with our free PD. Brandy is going to be back with us again because she is amazing. And tomorrow, same time, she's going to be talking to us about getting started with the AP CSP course. We also have next week cybersecurity, middle school, game development in Unity. That's a brand new course for us, or an updated course, I should say, very updated. So you'll want to check that out if you're interested in game development. And then we have collaborating with AI and teaching game development. So I put that link in there for you as well. And then if you could move to the next slide. I did put this one in the chat earlier, but I know that some people were interested in maybe finding out more about Pro, how much it is, what are the differences between Pro and free, anything like that. You can go to this codehs.com/learn more and get the information that you would like about that. And I think I did see a question come in. How many weeks before the exam date do you try to cover the full curriculum? So that one's for you, Brandy.
So I try and give myself at least 3 weeks before the exam, just to review. Sometimes that's not possible because it never fails. Most of the kids in my AP class are sports kids. And so they're always missing class leading up to the AP test because it's our baseball, softball season and track. And when baseball, softball, and track leave, it's like 90% of our school. So it's really hard to try and get those in. So I usually assign it as homework, but I usually do try and do 3 weeks minimum, just because I know my kids are missing 1 to 2 days of school. And when you're only in school 4 days a week, that's a ton. So I always make sure I give myself at least 3 weeks to review. That way, if they are missing, they still have plenty of time to review before the test. So yeah, definitely at least 3 weeks is my goal. I mean, at minimum 2, but that's because my kids are always gone in the spring. Never fails. Sports. Not that I want them to not do sports, but just, during AP testing, it's so hard.
Any other questions? I know time is up, and I do want to let you know that we are going to be having back to school webinars as well. So we will have some more webinars on AP CSA, AP CSP. You can always check out our YouTube channel, and we have many videos there that will be helpful for you as well. I do not see any other questions coming in, so we're going to let you guys go on time today. Thank you so much, Brandy. We very much appreciate you and all the information that you give our teachers. You are wonderful. If you could say a sentence about what a mini lecture is. Oh,
So
the video link will be sent out to everyone, I think tomorrow. Sometime shortly, you will receive the video link. Thanks for asking, Mark. And then, yeah, Dee wanted to know more about what your mini lectures are all about.
So the mini lecture is just me going over what they would normally get inside the video. I apologize for the barking dogs. The UPS man is here. And so students it's essentially what they would get in the video. I just go over in like a very brief, like I said, it only maybe takes 5 minutes for me to go through what they're going to do for the day. So that's just me covering what they're going to do for the day. It's like a mini lecture, because in computer science, you would like never spend an entire period lecturing your kids, because it's more hands-on, which I love.
Hopefully that helped you, Dee. Any other questions? If not, we do want to thank you for coming. Make sure you sign up for more free PD from CodeHS. And like I said, we're actually going to be putting out our schedule for the back to school webinar soon. You're very welcome. Awesome. Okay, we will see everyone later. Thank you. Bye.